Welcome back to the Piping Pastor, Theology Talks. Today we'll be talking about the ontological source of wisdom and spiritual development. Well, I was recently watching Potter Piper's travel log. The videos he's doing while he's traveling, and he mentioned a breakfast he was having with Dread Tiger, where they were discussing the source of their ontological selves. And yes, indeed, ontological is a $10 word. However, that conversation is both needful and sadly lacking in all phases of development within the United States right now. And indeed, I could say the world. But the place I think it's felt most and has the most negative repercussions is the lack of that conversation happening with children as they progress through their early and late teens. And the result of that has been tragic. So I thought, for such a weighty discussion, I would choose an appropriate pipe and tobacco. This is my favorite pipe. And no, I don't mean that in the sense that Brother Ed does, the armchair piper. I mean, this is literally quite my favorite pipe. And I know oftentimes when we refer to our pipes and our various different pipes, we always say one of my favorites. You know, basically because every pipe is our favorite pipe, and some we like more than others, but we don't like picking one out, right? But I can pick this one out and say this one is my favorite. This is my Curtit Meerschaum Churchwarden. And the reason this is my favorite, for a few reasons. First of all, it's beautiful. It's a hand-carved block meerschaum from Turkey. So it's a beautiful pipe. It's made of my favorite pipe material, meerschaum. I love the way it burns, and I love it both when it's white or yellow, depending on the beeswax used, and when it's colored up. When they're colored up, I think they're beautiful at all stages of development. But the reason this is my favorite is because it was a gift for my wife and kids for my birthday last year. And I wanted a meerschaum. I wanted a real meerschaum, and I wanted a churchwarden. And they spent months, trying to find a carver and getting one shipped over and so on and so forth. And they all hate pipe smoke. I've talked about that before. I'm the only person in my family who likes pipe smoke, right? So they went out of their way and researching and finding something for me, for my hobby, that they don't like. So this is a physical reminder of how much they care for me. So that's why it's my favorite. And in it, I am smoking my favorite tobacco, which again, I know we're always supposed to have like one of my favorites, but I have no problem naming this as my favorite. It's the Plum Pudding Bourbon Barrel Aged Reserve. There has never been a time where I've smoked this tobacco and haven't just loved it. So that being said, I don't intend to be one of those persons who cellars deep rather than wide, because I like a variety. There's a few that I will. I mean, I'll always have Plum Pudding Bourbon Barrel Aged Reserve in my cellar. It's always going to be there. I'll always have Capstan Blue, the Navy Cut. There are a few that'll always be there, but I like to experiment and try. There's a million different tobaccos out there, and in my view, it's kind of like food. You can have a few meals that you really like, like lasagna or steak or, foie gras, whatever it happens to be. But it's not a bad idea to try different stuff. So I kind of split it down the middle. I'll cellar deep on the stuff I know I really love, and I keep that to a small list. And then I rotate through a bunch of different stuff all the time. Because there's no one right way to do it. Anything the YTPC will teach you is that there's a million different ways to do things. The key is to enjoy yourself. This hobby is to enjoy yourself. So anyway, back to our topic. Discussing the ontological source of yourself, essentially the spiritual center of your being, is both needful and lacking, is what I've said. Over the last generation, really, maybe a little bit even further back than that, we've in the world of ministry have seen a rise in what we refer to as the nuns, not N-U-N, N-O-N-E-S. These are people who have grown up with a general understanding of spirituality, but have never adhered to one particular religious faith tradition. So they're spiritual with not religious is probably another term you've heard, or they don't have any kind of definition of their spirituality. It's just a really generalized kind of thing. This has been due in large part to the lack of the generational transfer of spirituality, and due in part additionally due to the lack of spiritual, religious, faith-based education available specifically in the United States, as I speak specifically to my own country. It began with the best of intentions in the United States, of course. We wanted to, be sensitive to all, right? We didn't want to be teaching Christian morals and ethics and prayer and things like that in the public school, because you may have a Buddhist or a Muslim or someone else like that, some of other faith tradition or some of no faith tradition, right? And we're very much about religious freedom here, which means we don't want to respect any particular faith tradition over another. It's a key aspect to our freedom. Team freedom. But in an effort to be, respectful of all traditions, we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, well, we can't, teach one over another, so we'll just get rid of all of it together. So all spiritual education just left. The idea was that it would continue in the home. That the older generation would teach the younger generation about their spirituality and what that meant. That they would get their religious education through their faith centers, right? Whether it was temple or a church or a mosque or out in the woods, The problem is that didn't happen. People got busy with work, didn't have time to follow their faith traditions, and so it became less and less important, became less and less prevalent, became less and less taught. And as a result, those conversations about our spiritual nature, those conversations about our ontological reality, our ontological source, didn't happen. People just stopped learning. The problem is we are not just physical, mental beings. We're physical, mental, and spiritual. And when you neglect one aspect of your development, it atrophies. But then there's a big part of you that's missing. And you know that's missing, but because you've had no education, you've had no teaching, no training, you've had no mentoring in that tradition, in your spirituality, something's missing, but you don't know what it is. Something's missing, but you can't put your finger on it. And that causes a great deal of anxiety. And when I say spirituality, I'm speaking from my own perspective. I'm a Christian minister, right? So from my own perspective, my spirituality is Christian, right? God, the Father, Jesus Christ, the Son, the Holy Spirit. So for me, my spiritual development is directed by my study of the Bible, by my prayer and devotions, and so on and so forth, and the moving of the Holy Spirit in me. And that's what I have taught to my children. It could be different for someone else. It doesn't matter what tradition you're in. That's what I'm saying. You could be a Taoist. You could be, any other tradition. I mean, there's a million out there, right? There's like 100 different flavors of Protestant Christianity. You've got Catholicism, Orthodox, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever, Norse paganism. The key thing is you need to train and bring those behind you, those that come after you, you need to train and mentor them in that truth. Whatever that ontological source is for you that needs to be passed along. That spiritual education needs to take place, and you can't rely on institutions of higher learning to do it for you. And as I said, the lack of this has resulted in very tragic consequences. It's been research, and I'm talking about peer-reviewed academic sociological research, that having a developed spiritual core, whatever that looks like for you, having a fully developed spiritual core, offers an 86% protective factor against suicidal ideation. That's a really long way of saying it. Nearly 9 out of 10 people have this layer of protection against thinking about killing themselves, because that yearning inside them, that spiritual yearning inside them, is directed and fueled and fed, and because they have an understanding of it, even if it's a rudimentary understanding of it, they know something else is there. They know something of importance is there. The Bible tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That word fear doesn't mean necessarily what people think it does, that we have to be afraid of God. Although you certainly could be. Creator of the universe. The all-powerful being who loves us but has rules, and does not have endless patience when it comes to rebellion. So you could actually be afraid of God. Demons were. But in the context in that one, that fear is more akin to awe. Reverent awe. Realizing the power and majesty of the Lord and being in awe of it. That's the beginning of wisdom. The Bible lays it out that way, because if we have that connection, that spiritual understanding, that knowledge of the ontological source of our reality, that begets wisdom, in that it places us on a firm foundation from which we can do other investigations, with the center, the core of ourself, being solid and understood. When you don't have that solid core, you don't have that solid base, that real understanding of who you are, rooted in an ontological source of reality, you kind of flit about like the wind. That doesn't offer wisdom. You can gain knowledge, you can gain a whole lot of knowledge, and gain no wisdom. And then as a result, you end up where a lot of the nuns have today. Spiritual, but not religious. So when it comes to the challenging parts of life and suffering and questions and things that they wrestle with, the spiritual core that should be formed within them is like Jell-O. It's kind of there, but there's nothing really to it. And it's hard to hang your hat on a wall of Jell-O. So, yes, ontological is a $10 word, but it's a $10 word we should be using a lot more often, and especially with those that come up behind us. Well, that is it for this time. As I mentioned before, we're going to be starting to pack and move pretty soon on our en route to El Paso. So I'll be here doing a few more videos before all this has to get put in boxes. And then we'll be setting up in an entirely new place, so I'll have a different background. But in the meantime, hope you have a lovely week. As always, happy reading.